Hey guys, I'm afraid I had to change devices, so I hope that the picture is still going to be as clear. So I was talking about how Wolf Larson is depicted as the perfect primitive man, right? The apex predator, right? He very intelligent, but his reason only made him all the more savage, right? And then you have Maud, who is the perfect type of civilized woman. Usually in sea romances or pirate romances, if you will, right? The trope is normally the good civilized woman, very much similar to the kind of Victorian trope of a female. The dream of the romance is she manages to take the bad boy, right? Whoever it would be, like the primitive savage man. You probably noticed in a lot of those like weird Harlequin romance movies, you have those guys with the rippling muscles on the cover, bare chested, and they look like savages, and the barbarian king and his lady or whatever. There's this very common romance trope where the good civilized woman, she encounters the bad boy, the barbarian, the pirate. This is still very common in vampire fiction, werewolf fiction. If you didn't know that the most common love interests in those romance novels are vampire, werewolf, pirate, CEO, and I don't know what else, right? But you'll notice that in all those cases, they're all alpha male predators. So there's a common trope in romance novels, and in the time of sea romances of Jack London, it was absolutely no different. It was the trope of a woman civilizing or domesticating the bad boy, whether it be the barbarian or the pirate or whatever. We still see this in movies today. Like, one of the things that I thought was really weird was, of all of the Marvel characters to get a huge fan base and like scores and scores of fan art and female fans, in the Marvel movies, one of the most popular characters was actually the villain Loki, right? And Loki had millions and millions of female fans, and there was all sorts of adoring fan art dedicated to him. There was something in the psyche about the idea of turning the bad boy good. That's just something that's very common in the romance genre. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this, but there's this expression, nice guys finish last, right? And one of the reasons why this trope is out there, this trope of nice guys finish last, is the idea that oftentimes nice guys could be depicted as either weak, timid, or unmasculine. And so what we see in a lot of sea romances and a lot of modern trashy romance books in general is that you often start out with someone who's already strong, because it's easier to try to domesticate a wild animal than it is to turn a domestic animal wild, right? So in this case, right, one of the things I love about this book by London is, instead of doing the highly implausible task of civilizing a barbarian, which is if you want to look at the movie Twilight, or the Twilight books, or if you want to look at, shall we say, something like 50 Shades of Grey, don't read it if you have, or if you haven't read it, don't. It's the same dumb trope over and over again, where you can take a bad boy and somehow turn him into good, turn him into the gentle, caring thing you want, while still keeping him as a powerful alpha male, right? It's a really dumb trope. I have a good friend named Father Clement who said, with men and female relationships, one of the reasons why they often struggle is because women expect men to change and they don't, and men expect women to change, or women expect women not to change and they do. But one of the things that we need to understand is, rather than taking this typical unrealistic path for a sea romance, London actually looks at it square in the face and says, yeah, Wolf Larson is not changing for anybody. And why would he? I mean, he's a savage. He's a brute. That's not going to be a thing. So in this particular thing, what is instead has to happen is, instead of the savage needing to become domesticated or civilized or converted by love, which quite frankly usually doesn't happen, right? What does happen, though, is that Humphrey is going to have to man up. And this is a heck of a lot more realistic, just generally speaking. One of the things that Humphrey does point out early in the book is that a lot of these sailors who clearly, right, have not been around women enough, right, being around men all the time makes them savage, right? But now they have become so savage. Someone like Wolf Larsen has become so savage, it's not likely that a woman is going to drastically change his behavior. So, and the interesting thing is while a lot of people do not like the romantic part of the Sea Wolf, a lot of the critics really despise it. The interesting thing is part of, and this is kind of an important thing to understand, the romance in the Sea Wolf is partly a satire. Meaning it's mocking a lot of the typical genre of the sea romance where, the woman meets the strong gentleman who's there to take her away. Humphrey Van Weyden isn't that strong. He's going to have to get strong. He's going to have to do something, and he's going to have to trick Wolf Larsen into beating him, or he's going to have to win by skill and craft and intelligence. He's not going to be able to just train and get stronger and then slay the dragon like a typical knight. And it's not the stupid, normal, like, oh, the savages won over to goodness and to being a domestic-like husband because of my beauty and my charm. No, that's a bunch of nonsense, right? So even though a lot of people don't like the romance in this tale, one of the things that Jack London is trying to get at is that it is unrealistic that people will change based on mere attraction. Right? You'll notice that we now know that Humphrey is very much attracted to Maud, but the change, right, has already happened to Humphrey. Humphrey did not change because of a woman. Because of a woman, he didn't have to become a more manly man. He's already had to come a long way by himself just to survive, right? We notice that what often has to happen when it comes to this idea of romance and men having to change who they are, it's often not motivated by the things that oftentimes romances will tell us about. I mean, Humphrey became the way he was because circumstance, because he was trying to live, because he had to figure out a way to survive. Even now, right, when he's trying to protect Maud, his first thought wasn't even, I'm in love with Maud. His first thought was, Maud needs to be protected, right? So the idea of this idea of chivalry and this idea of a real gentleman, a real character, right? It is the nature of how London is, trying to convey the character of a person, that Humphrey Van Weyden's authentic love comes from the fact that he would have been a gentleman who tried to protect a lady even before he fell for her, right? It is not because of love or attraction that moves a gentleman to want to protect a lady, right? That's kind of besides the point. Because Wolf Larsen can be attracted to her and still be a savage toward her. He could maybe murder her if she rejects his affections or something like that. The character of that, it's not the moral behavior, right? The idea is morals and values, right, determine behavior before attraction. Because the idea, as we said before, right, if we have a character, our character is generally what determines what our decisions are. The things that have made us who we are, what we value, our values, those are going to be what determine our decisions more than just, say, the whims of the moment, unless you're whimsical like Wolf Larsen. Remember, whims, impulses, kind of irrelevant desires. The idea is that even if I were to send you all back in time 5 minutes and you had no knowledge of, I sent you back in time without knowledge of the future, you would probably do the same thing over and over and over again. Not because the future is fixed, but because every serious decision we make is based upon who we are, our moral character, our moral fiber, right? In romances, typically, right, when love conquers all, right, people assume that people make their decisions, now because like when the pirate meets the woman and falls in love, now he has to be a good man. That's a bunch of nonsense. In the case of Wolf Larsen and Humphrey Van Weyden, what we see is how they're going to react to Maud is not determined by Maud's beauty or Maud's intelligence or her charm or anything like that. It's determined by what makes them who they are before they met her, right? Who they are and their decision to either be a brute or a gentleman, that's formed in them before they ever meet. And so it's unlikely that a gentleman is all of a sudden going to become a brute or a brute is going to become a gentleman. That's the way romantic books and movies are often set up, which is just a bunch of nonsense. The other thing that we should understand about this idea is that sometimes people do try to change. They do try to want to change because of a relationship or they want someone else to like them. But usually that behavior can't last long term. I don't know if you've ever had a boyfriend or a girlfriend situation like this, but oftentimes, people try to get into something they don't really like for a relationship, or they try to change something about their personality for a relationship. And often it just can't last because the thing is who they are and what makes them what they are is not determined by attraction. It's determined by character. And so in this way, right, London's romance is actually going contrary to a lot of the way a lot of normal romances go. So I'm just going to take a moment, since I have a few extra minutes. I want to criticize a lot of this typical trope of the domesticating of a predator, the idea of a good, beautiful woman being able to domesticate someone who was bad before, whether they're being a pirate, a barbarian, a CEO, a werewolf, a vampire, all this other nonsense, right? It's kind of funny how it's natural because it is absolutely natural in the romantic genre, right? In the romantic genre, it is natural to want the masculine character to be strong, right? Masculinity as strength. That makes all sorts of sense because in a lot of those romance stories, the role of the masculine is to be the protector, the one who can make you feel safe and secure, right? And especially on this Darwinistic biological level, right? Security, of course, is very, very important. So it's easy to be attracted to strength even when the character is a villain, because there is something appealing about power. But here's the point, is when you think you can take a predator who's already strong and then turn them, so it's basically the idea is you want to turn a wolf, right, and you want to change it into a guard dog, right? That's kind of the idea. And by the way, this is the language that Schopenhauer describes what women do to men, right? That they want to take wolves who are naturally free and ferocious and strong, and they want to domesticate them and put collars on them and restrain them with chains, right? I mean, this is the typical Schopenhauer philosophy. The interesting thing is, and the idea of wanting to change a predator, right? It seems to forget, and people do this all the time, right? They often forget that it is possible to try to make a wolf obey you, right? If you have a club, you can make a wolf behave in a way that you want it to behave, but it will still be a wolf. The moment that any kind of wild animal, like you see zookeepers play with tigers in a cage, but they're still wild animals, right? The tiger trainer even knows that if the right situation comes up, it's very easy for that tiger to go feral and for that tiger to turn into the savage beast that rips them apart. The key idea is no matter how much people want to write about the tropes of a vampire or a werewolf who falls in love and thereby becomes the powerful protector, the thing that we need to understand, and this is, I'm not saying that people can't change, but this is just something that people want to forget. The most effective means of predicting future behavior is past behavior. It is absolutely that simple. It is by far the most strongly way to predict behavior. Now, people's feelings change, but feelings do not determine people's behavior in the long run. Character does. And being attracted to something or liking something, that doesn't change character. In order to be able to change someone on a deeper level, they have to be reached on the level of the mind and the level of the soul. And that's why that trope is largely a myth.